On today's episode of State of the Rockets, we're going to be talking about the Rockets giving Jae'Sean Tate a new deal, Kevin Durant asking for a trade out of Brooklyn, Daryl Morey turning the 76ers into the Philadelphia Rockets, and we're also going to talk just a wee little bit about Summer League coming up next week, so stay tuned. Welcome to State of the Rockets, the premier Houston Rockets podcast. I'm your host, Roosh Williams, the Mastodon. I am also co-host of the Noble and Roosh Show, the number one podcast on the Ball is Life network, where one of the only podcasts in the game where you will find exclusive content interviewing NBA players, journalists, beat writers, bloggers, all that kind of stuff. So check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also see some of those videos on this YouTube channel. Most recently, I interviewed Tari Eason, now of the Houston Rockets. So check that out. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Jackson Gatlin. Jackson, how you living? How you doing? Are you with us?
I am with you. I'm doing much better than I was last week, my man. I was done for. I was, on my third podcast in a row reacting to the NBA draft. It was a very special evening for the Houston Rockets, but we are here. We're ready to talk a little bit NBA free agency, all that good stuff. But yes, I am your other host, Jackson Gatlin. I also host Locked on Rockets 5 days a week, the only 5-day a week, Monday through Friday, Houston Rockets basketball podcast. I'm also the host of Locked on NBA Mondays and the founder of ClutchCityControlRoom.com. You can track me down on the Bird app on Twitter at JT Gatlin. You can follow the Mastodon himself at Roosh Williams. And we've got a lot to talk about today, man.
Yeah, so on today's episode, we're going to run down the following topics, okay? The Rockets gave Jae'Sean Tate a new deal, 3 years, $22 million. We're going to talk all about that. Kevin Durant has asked to be traded from Brooklyn. So hallelujah, amen. Rafael Stone's prayers answered much earlier than anyone would have guessed.
Sweet vindication.
Not yet. We're not out of the woods yet, but it looks nice.
Almost
looks nice. We're going to talk about Daryl Morey turning the 76ers into the Philadelphia Rockets with all of the acquisitions they decided to make straight out of free agency. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Summer League coming up next week. The Rockets will be participating. I will be there, I think. I mean, I'm supposed to be. It's just a matter of if I show up, but I will be there. So if you're there, find me, grab a beer or something like that. But let's start off, man. Jae'Sean Tate, 3 years, $22 million. Before we get into it, can you do a better job than I of explaining the logistics of, not picking up his team option and then renewing the deal in the manner that they did?
I hope I can do it justice. I don't consider myself a cap expert by any stretch of the imagination, but to my knowledge, right, the benefit of him opting out and inking a new deal allowed him to have a greater amount of total years on the deal as opposed to just a flat out extension of the pre-existing contract. To my knowledge, I think I'm doing that justice. So instead of picking up the team option for the final year of his contract for next season, the Rockets declined that team option. He's a unrestricted free agent, which gave them some protections on what they could offer him should another team decide to approach Jae'Sean Tate, want to throw some money at him, that kind of thing. But this situation looked like it was kind of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. They had probably a pre-existing deal under the table, ready to go, tampering, all that good stuff, whatever. Well, I guess it's not tampering if it's your own player, right? Well before free agency actually showed up at 6 o'clock Thursday evening. And so this is one of those deals that just made sense on both sides. They got him on a team-friendly deal. We can kind of break down the actual specifics of the deal and why. I think it's a total slam dunk if you're the Rockets to retain Jae'Sean Tate's services for a little over $7 million a year. That's an absolute win in my book. Man, I wish I could hear you, man. That'd be so great.
Sorry, I hit the button. It just didn't work. I am also not a capologist, although I'm going to start reading more and more gradually. I started, then I stopped. I need to start again because it can be interesting, nerdy stuff. But regardless, so my understanding is that there's something called the Arenas rule or the Arenas provision. If you want more of a breakdown or explanation, tweet at Mr. Nathan Fogg on Twitter because he's the one his tweet about it is how I found out about what that was. So basically, because of that, it's something about second rounders and how you can extend them or offer them a new deal, something like that.
Second rounders and undrafted players.
Right. But basically, as a result of that, with the Rockets not picking up Jae'Sean Tate's option and making him an unrestricted free agent, because of that rule, it capped the amount of annual salary, I think, that Jae'Sean Tate could receive at somewhere around like 11 million or something like that.
10 million, I believe. 10 million.
10.3, maybe it's 10.3 million. Basically close enough to the value of the mid-level exception, which the Rockets have access to, which is around, I think, 10.5 or 11 million, somewhere in there. And so basically it set up a situation where Jae'Sean Tate was an unrestricted free agent, yes, but any team that would have offered him the maximum amount that he could have been offered, the Rockets had enough money to either match or beat that out. They wouldn't have had they wouldn't automatically be able to re-sign him as a restricted free agent by matching, but I'm pretty sure they had that worked out. So the way it ended up going, and then also I want to explain that I think I like the move. Maybe they were in lockstep with Jae'Sean Tate and his team, and the deal was going to get done one way or the other with Houston, and Jae'Sean Tate never intended to test the market. I have no idea about that. But if he did want to test the market, if he had a badass season this coming season, like let's say he plays his game and he adds a 36% three ball, and some team wants to go out there and give Jae'Sean Tate what Gary Harris just got, 2 years, $26 million. And let's say they price the Rockets out, or it becomes a matter of, do the Rockets want to use that cap room that they have, that they presumably will have next offseason, for that kind of deal on Jae'Sean Tate? Or and next offseason there will be more teams with enough cap room to compete with the Rockets and possibly outbid them for Jae'Sean Tate. So based on all that, you kind of took a low risk, high reward play, and that's what they ended up with. They got him on a great value. 7.3 million, I think, is what it comes out to per year on average. 22 million divided by 3 years, I think, is what it was. So it's like 7.3 something million for what he brings to the table. I mean, look, I talked about this in a Spaces, but Lou Dort and Jae'Sean Tate are kind of comparable. And OKC did the exact same thing with Lou Dort's contract, by the way. But Lou Dort and Jae'Sean Tate are comparable in terms of, the roles they play. Lou Dort's got a higher offensive ceiling, scores the ball better, but they're both very good defensively. They're both high-energy hustle guys that help their team in that manner. And Lou Dort just got I think his deal was 5 years, $87 million. So
like
he's
17.5 mil a year or something like that.
17, 34, 51, 68, 85. Yeah, 17 point something million. Yeah, you're right. So he got paid like almost 2.5 times per year what Jae'Sean Tate is being paid. Do you think Lou Dort is 2.5 times better the player, 250% player that Jae'Sean Tate is?
No.
I don't. So the value is incredible. And it remains to be seen how the Rockets structured this contract. I mean, we know from the Morey era, and Rafael Stone, I think, seemed to have picked some things up from the Morey era, obviously, because he was involved in a lot of those transactions. And we saw it with some of the way he signed Tate, using like slivers of the MLE here and there when it's left over, I think. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think that's how they did that. So we'll see if they get creative with the structure of this deal, right? Maybe they front load it, and it's like you take the cap hit, and then later the salary's lower, and so it becomes more palatable. I don't know. Maybe it's incentive based. Maybe there's a favorable team option. Like, we'll see. We don't have the details yet, but I have a feeling that it's not just going to be a straight up 3 for 22 deal. I feel like there's going to be some classic like Rockets, aspect of it. So I think it's a great move, man. I think it's a great move. Jae'Sean Tate, you keep him around. He's reliable. He's solid. He works hard. He defends well. You let him now play also with the monkey off of his back, not having to worry about his numbers, right? We kind of saw him isolate a lot this past season, and you could maybe theorize he knows he's got to get paid, but now he's paid, so he can just go back to playing basketball. Defensive guy, hard worker, next to Jabari Smith, Jalen Green. Like, I'm excited. What are your thoughts?
I love it from a couple different standpoints. One of the other options too, right? In addition to some of the areas you laid out as far as what the actual structure of that contract might look like, there might be some non-guaranteed money elsewhere in the contract, right? Maybe that final year is non-guaranteed or only partially guaranteed. And so you look at the contract as a whole and it's not even a full-blown $22 million. So I don't know. It remains to be seen. We'll get the details, I'm sure, in the coming days on the specifics of Jae'Sean Tate's contract. But I think for two other reasons, I love this because I think it's another step in the direction of the Rockets showing that they're taking care of their guys, right? They could have absolutely just left Jae'Sean Tate on the super team-friendly deal that they were already signed to, pick up the team option and push it off further down the road and say, no, we're just, we'll revisit this further down the line. If you have a good year, yeah, we'll pay you further down the line, but you got to earn that, right? You got to go out there and actually prove you're worth us paying you that money. No, they decided to decline that option and say, you know what, we've seen enough out of you. We value what you bring to the table. We're going to commit some, sizable money to you, right? This is an undrafted guy that just got a contract for 3 years, $22 million. That's a huge win for undrafted guys everywhere, right? It's not Duncan Robinson undrafted guy money, but it's still a pretty solid win. If you're Jae'Sean Tate, who's had to scrap and claw and fight and do like the overseas route and everything to try and prove himself as an NBA player, to come in as a 25-year-old rookie and then to be able to walk away and say you're making this kind of money, big boy NBA money now, that's incredible. That's a huge win for him, for his representation, all of that. And I think it's a win for the Rockets that they're showing, hey, we're taking care of our guys. So I love it from that perspective. And then the other thing is, I think Jae'Sean Tate is kind of poised to, I don't want to call him like the old man of the locker room, right? But it very much feels like EG is more than likely the next domino to probably fall here for the Rockets, the next trade piece that makes sense. There's a lot of NBA teams out there that are interested in procuring his services. And maybe that changes a little bit with the bombshell news that Kevin Durant has requested out of Brooklyn. We're going to talk about that here in just a moment. So maybe that changes the NBA landscape a little bit and changes the market for Eric Gordon. But Jae'Sean Tate isn't a third-year player, right? Like, he's an older, young player. And I think having his voice in this Rockets locker room, having him as a guy who can kind of help keep some of the younger guys accountable, somebody who really had to work and grind to where he's at today, that type of work ethic is exactly the kind of guy you want around these young guys. And we've already got the knowledge, right? Jalen Green, incredible work ethic. Jabari Smith, incredible work ethic. Tari Eason, work ethic. Like, the Rockets are, accruing a certain type of, personality, mentality in these players. And I think Jae'Sean Tate fits right into that mold, but he's a bit older, right? Maybe commands a little bit more respect around the locker room because of that seniority. And I think even at times this past season was a bit of that bridging gap between maybe the vets on the roster and the young guys on the roster, because he can kind of get along with both sides. And so keeping him around is important, I think, for the long-term benefit of this Rockets rebuild. So I love it on all fronts. And if he suddenly has a three ball on top of everything else he brings to the table this next season, and he's shooting 35, 36, 37% from three, and you've got an insane 3-and-D talent locked down for the next 3 years at just over $7 million a year, that is insane value. So huge win, another win. Just lining up the wins for Rafael Stone. Just knock him down. And I mean, at this point, I don't know. We gotta I'm ready to head down to Toyota Center and build a statue at this point. So,
well, look, but that's the beauty of it. Even if he doesn't develop a three, he's worth this contract. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
If he develops a three, he's worth.
He's outplayed the contract already.
Right. Exactly. And that's a great point. And I agree with that. I was talking about this in the spaces earlier tonight, the same spaces. Tate's like one of the vets, kind of. He's not a typical third-year player. He went through the ranks. He went overseas, went to Australia, worked his way. He's like a Pat Bev type story, So he's got that clout and that respect, and he's earned that. And I would imagine his teammates are very well aware of what he's endured and respect him for it. So yeah, he adds to that voice. He adds to that backbone of culture and identity that the Rockets are trying to build, of working hard. With Jabari Smith, hopefully Tari Eason, with Jalen Green, Josh Christopher, these guys. So yeah, like it on all fronts. Awesome move by Rafael Stone. We're starting to see when the Rockets do something, like we saw the Rockets were not picking up his team option and everyone freaked out, that usually they know what they're doing, So it's nice to kind of have that confidence. But yeah, for all those reasons, man, Jae'Sean Tate is a Rocket. Oh, and then also it's a tradable salary. If they need to trade it, it's very tradable, very friendly.
Worst case scenario further down the line, if they need to deal Jae'Sean Tate $7 million a year, that is, depending on how it looks, obviously with, where the front end, back end salary looks like. I mean, that's easy contract to move. But elsewhere on the Rockets free agency front, relatively quiet. They didn't pick up the options or they didn't extend qualifying offers, I should say, to Bruno Fernando, Trevelyan Queen, who got signed elsewhere that we're going to talk about a little bit later on, and Anthony Lamb. So didn't retain those guys, and they didn't make any other free agency moves. There were some, rumored big men that they might have interest in: Nick Claxton, Isaiah Hartenstein, as reported by Fagan and Eco from the Chronicle and the Athletic, respectively, that the Rockets might have interest in those two big men. Nick Claxton got picked up. He's returning to the Brooklyn Nets, 2 years, $20 million, and then Isaiah Hartenstein, 2 years, $16 million to the New York Knicks. So a couple potential free agency targets off the board for the Rockets. But Roosh, the big news, the news that all Rockets fans everywhere should be absolutely head over heels in love with: Kevin Durant forcing his way out of Brooklyn, has had enough of the Brooklyn Nets franchise organization, all of that. Look, it may have been a bit of a lackluster free agency period, honestly, and I think I'm pretty confident that a big reason for that is if you've got the bombshell news of KD that drops just a handful of hours before free agency kicks off, that probably threw a gigantic wrench in a lot of teams' plans for what they wanted to maybe do in free agency, because suddenly you have half the NBA just immediately frozen in its tracks, thinking, oh, could we be in play for KD? Hold up, let's call up Sean Marks in Brooklyn and see exactly what they're looking for, because a majority of the teams in the NBA would love to pick up Kevin Durant. Now, only a few teams are, legitimately viable options. He wants to probably go to a ready-made contender, but this is a gigantic win for the Houston Rockets, for Rafael Stone, for the front office, for the revisionists for the original critics of the James Harden trade. They can now eat crow, because every single day that we get further and further away from that James Harden trade, it looks better and better and better. And Rafael Stone looks even more like a genius now than he did when that trade was originally consummated.
Yeah, I won't take a victory lap yet. I mean, I'm happy and I'm celebrating, but we still got to see how it plays out. I have a feeling that whatever Brooklyn does, I mean, look, they might get a legit star. We don't know who's going to emerge as a suitor. I would not feel comfortable with anything we've heard so far. The rumors always heat up and they get juicier, right? And there's going to be a late minute player, or there's going to be a late game player, and you're just like, oh, whoa, they're in the mix? Like, what? I didn't expect this to happen. So I expect something like that to go down. But I would expect Brooklyn to recoup, to at least be one of those 7 to 10 seed type teams, which, the Rockets could get a lotto pick from that. They could get something more similar to the pick they got this season with the 17th pick, if Brooklyn is able to get a Karis LeVert type package and have picks and then some high functioning role players, or some volume inefficient high volume guys that can get you to 500, so you're a 9 seed, something like that. To where the odds of it being a high-end pick or a super high-end pick are low, but you'll get the 12th or the 13th pick or whatever it is, right? So I mean, I imagine they're going to end up somewhere, something like that, because Kevin Durant is a massive, massive asset, there's going to be value there. It's just a matter of what is that value. Excuse me. But it is a huge win for the Rockets. Excuse me, I had to yawn. It's late. I'm tired.
We kept him up past his bedtime.
It's like that. Was it DJ Khaled? I don't care what nobody say. Whatever, because I'm out here grinding. That was the point. Is we're out here grinding. Regardless, though. So I've been spacing and
that was so bad. That was
just no, because I'm out here grinding. No, so anyways, back to the content. But look. It's a huge win for the Rockets because James Harden it has not even been 18 months since the Rockets traded James Harden, if you could believe that, which is crazy. And I don't think when the Rockets made that trade that they thought it would blow up within 18 months. I think they were prepared and hoped for hey, maybe after 2.5 seasons, maybe they win the title, then they flame out after a season and okay, we're back. But man, we're talking, it took one full season since the trade for that thing to blow up or to seemingly blow up.
I think that's why I'm ready to run the victory laps, is because even if like this trade doesn't turn into, a bunch of top 5 picks, number 1 overall selections, whatever, the fact that it's blown up this spectacularly just a year and a half removed from the original trade is already, it's not quite best case scenario for the Rockets yet, because it could get even better depending on the return for KD, obviously, and how hard the Nets actually do bottom out, where they struggle, if they do finish somewhere in the 7 to 10 seed range, or if they actually bottom out and really suck for the next few years, depending on what the post KD era Nets actually look like. It's still just a gigantic win, because like, this was the risk, right? The risk was, hey, best case scenario, if you're Brooklyn, is like the big 3 actually works, right? They win a title or 2, they're competitive, and maybe they start to kind of fall apart near the back end of the deal, and you get a good pick or 2 on the back end, like in 2025, 2026, right? Maybe that's when the picks start actually looking like they've got some semblance of value. The Rockets already got value out of one of the picks with pick 17 this year in Tari Eason. Like, that was already way better than we thought was going to happen this early on in the picks acquired from the Brooklyn Nets. So that's why I'm kind of ready to just start running the victory laps, because this is already, I think, better than what a lot of Rockets fans truly expected this deal to kind of coalesce as, and kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Why am I blanking on this? It's not coalesce. That's not the right word. Anyways, I'm gonna stumble over this. Materialize. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah. You're the best. The mastodon. Hard at work. But right, there we go. It's already materializing better than I think anybody could have predicted to this point. So I think at that point, you've just got to be incredibly happy with the returns that it kind of looks like the Rockets are going to get. And even if it doesn't ever again turn into top draft picks, top 5 picks, maybe jump up to a number 1 overall selection, if we're talking about, a handful of lottery picks for the next 5 years, that's still a win. Even if Brooklyn is like a middling playoff team somewhere in the 7 to 10 range, that's still, I pulled up the NBA standings from this past season because I wanted to kind of compare. This past year in the East, the Nets were the 7th seed, right? So in the East, Nets were 7th seed, and you had Hawks at 8, Cavs at 9, and Hornets at 10. And so record-wise, out there in the East, from those 4 slots, the way the picks conveyed, you had obviously the Brooklyn Nets pick at 17 to the Houston Rockets. And then, why is this? There it is. Okay. Yeah, the Nets pick at 17 to the Rockets. And then you had the Cavs at 14. Oh, well, never mind. Tankathon updated their roster. Wow. Mid-podcast. That's not cool.
Wow.
I don't have the board that I wanted. Where is this?
Oh, my God. Look, see, here's your look into the behind the scenes. Jackson goes off script. Loses his mind.
There's never a script. How dare you? No, I legitimately, right. My point was just going to be that those 4 teams, when you're in kind of that play-in area in the Eastern Conference, right, you're kind of flirting with the back end of the lottery range record-wise, and then out west, depending on how things shake out record-wise, maybe the West is a little bit better this next year. And so maybe those teams in the Eastern Conference, those picks wind up being a little bit more towards, or skewing towards that 10 to 14 range, give or take. So even if the Nets have some semblance of competitiveness in the post-KD era, the pick should still be relatively valuable in what's going to convey to Houston. So,
yeah, no, I agree. I mean, and you hope that Brooklyn, in exchange for Durant, gets something like the Harden package. I mean, that would be so ideal. I doubt it's going to happen, but they just get a ton of picks. And now, to be fair, if Brooklyn got something like Karis LeVert and Jarrett Allen, LOL, because those were their players, they'd probably keep them. Based on what we've heard, they would probably keep them and not go total rebuild. The Rockets went total rebuild. The Rockets made the play for Oladipo. That didn't work out, and then they went total rebuild. So,
because the Rockets still had the luxury of having slight protections on the picks that they had, obviously the very first one that eventually turned into Jalen Green, having the top 4 protections on that pick, is what saved that pick ultimately, with them finishing with the worst record in the NBA. So it made sense for them to, for them to kind of pivot a little bit and then get down to, wow, for them to
sound like Beavis and Butthead.
Long, hard. Anyways, so it made sense for them to pivot, right? And have the opportunity to bottom out and have the best possible odds to actually keep their selection there. Here's one that I want to pitch to you because I threw this up over at Locked on Rockets, and I really think this is an interesting scenario for Houston to consider a little bit. They could very easily get involved with Brooklyn and with this, eventual KD trade as a third team facilitator, because right now the Nets have zero interest in being bad, right? They don't own any of their own picks for the next 5 years. So bottoming out, being a bad team serves them zero purpose. So they should want to be competitive, which kind of makes it difficult to look for a return from the KD package because if you're Brooklyn, you want to get back players who can conceivably help you be competitive right here in the here and now with Ben Simmons, with maybe Kyrie Irving if he sticks around in the post KD era. Like, it still remains TBD on what happens with Kyrie and all of this, but the Nets want to and probably need to be competitive with whatever offer they get in a 1-for-1 trade for KD. Now, if you loop the Rockets back into this, and conceivably, you send KD to the interested third-party team who actually want his services, who are contending for a title, whatever. You send talented player from that team to the Houston Rockets, who could potentially pick up, who could jumpstart the rebuild even further by adding an already proven talent to their core. And then the Brooklyn Nets can recoup their own draft picks from the original James Harden trade and then be incentivized to actually bottom out and rebuild and just be a bad team rather than having to be competitive in the post-KD era. Like, I know that right now Phoenix is like the front runner team for this, and some permutation of DeAndre Ayton to Houston doesn't exactly make sense in this scenario, but if you throw in a team like the Miami Heat or the Boston Celtics or any number of other teams that might have a kind of like B-tier star, borderline A-tier star that might be interested or that they might be interested in trading for Kevin Durant, maybe a Jaylen Brown, a Bam Adebayo type, is that somebody you'd be willing to give up multiple picks for and trade them back to Brooklyn to get that one guaranteed like star caliber piece right away? Or would you rather just kind of risk it and see how those picks pan out over the next 5 years?
Yeah. So, and that's an interesting one. It would have to be someone. So basically in this scenario, it would be a 3-team trade. Brooklyn would trade Kevin Durant to a team. Let's just use the Bucks because well, that's not a realistic example, but let's just use the Bucks.
I think I picked Celtics because Jaylen Brown, I feel like, is like on the cusp of like talented enough to want to give up the picks for, and it kind of makes sense with KD up there.
So Jaylen Brown, okay. Brooklyn would trade Kevin Durant to Boston. Yes. Boston would trade Jaylen Brown to Houston.
Yes.
In exchange for Houston in exchange, Houston basically would be giving Brooklyn the rights back to its draft picks and swaps. And so that's the triangle, right? Yes. Houston gives up draft picks and swaps back to Brooklyn. Brooklyn gives KD up. Boston gives Jaylen Brown up. So Houston basically uses those picks to go get another star to put next to Jalen Green and KPJ. Now, here's the fun part, though, because that's like, do you really want to do that? Basically trade what you got for James Harden and turn it into like James Harden for Jaylen Brown 1-for-1, or for Jaylen Brown and Tari Eason. What you could do, and this is just total speculation, just playing around, and I'm not like a trade machine kind of guy, but just thinking out loud, you don't have to give it all back.
No,
right? You can give some of it back, right? You can give a pick and a swap or a couple picks or, whatever. So you'd still keep some of it. And then you could also get something from Boston. You get picks from Boston to Houston.
Just to also chime in on that note, you could also do something like you could modify the arrangement on some of the picks, right? Maybe you throw some protections on them. So instead of, just giving back the picks in their entirety, maybe you say, all right, here, we're going to give you back some of the picks. And on this very last one that we're going to hold on to, we'll float you a top 4 protection on it or something, right? So there's a lot of different permutations of what this could look like. And when you control a team's future draft capital for the next 5 years, I mean, again, this puts Brooklyn in a really precarious position because in the midst of trying to deal KD, this could be their one opportunity to wheel and deal with Houston to actually regain the fate of their franchise. And for a team that's about to lose multiple stars within the span of a year, like, I mean, I can't think of a better scenario than to actually recoup your own draft picks and then be able to have your own destiny in your hands and just truly bottom out rather than having to be competitive under some notion of, oh, well, we don't want to suck because there's, no reward at the end of the year if we're the worst team.
Yes. Yeah. So, and depending on what Houston gives up to Brooklyn, how deep they go, let's say they give up a lot to Brooklyn in terms of relinquishing the draft capital that they took from them. Maybe they get picks from Boston in exchange to cover some of the back end of that. Maybe Houston gives up less to Brooklyn and Boston sends those picks to Brooklyn instead. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. I don't know how that stuff works. I'm not like a trade guy, but I feel like that could work. So, so that would be, one way to approach it. What I do think is going to happen, though, I feel like Brooklyn's going to get a draft pick haul, role players, and then they're going to try to flip those role players.
Do you think they're going to get a cornerstone talent, right? Because that was the biggest holdup on the James Harden trade, right? Is the draft capital was there. It was the the greatest haul for a single player in NBA history, right? But they didn't get a quote unquote cornerstone talent or franchise player in return. And I think that's why a lot of, pundits looked at the trade as a loss in the immediate, there and now. There and now, that's not, whatever, that's a terrible expression. Point is, right, that's why people like, Bill Simmons jumped out and tried to crucify Houston and Rafael Stone for the trade, because there wasn't a tangible return, an asset where you could look at and say, yeah, the Rockets got XYZ player for James Harden. Instead, it was just this, idea of what the draft picks could be further down the line. Whereas with this KD situation, one, it'll be funny to see just how harshly individuals judge the return that the Brooklyn Nets do or do not get for KD in the midst of all this, right? Because, they dumped on Houston pretty hard for the return that we got for James Harden. Hopefully they keep the same energy when it comes to KD if the trade packages look similar. And then two, I just wonder, again, what star level cornerstone talents are truly out there. Again, DeAndre Ayton's the one that makes a ton of sense. The Vegas odds are pointing towards Phoenix Suns right now as being the favorite to land KD, and we learned from the NBA draft to not doubt Vegas, given the last-minute shuffling of odds to go number one overall in this last year's draft and the whole Paolo Banchero, Jabari Smith shuffle. So I'm leaning Phoenix at this point, but DeAndre Ayton also has to choose to want to play in Brooklyn because he has to agree to a sign and trade deal, which means he has to agree to wherever they're trying to ship him off to. So that complicates things even further. Plus, there's cap ramifications on the fact that the way a sign and trade player works is DeAndre Ayton's salary only counts for half of the signed amount as an outgoing salary, whereas KD counts for the full amount when he's coming in or something to that effect. And it makes things really complicated from the math perspective to get the salaries to actually match up. So there's a whole lot of red tape that's going to have to be jumped through, to be able to make this trade work from Phoenix to Brooklyn if it's just a one-for-one deal between those two organizations.
Yeah, so you kind of touched on it, but basically in these situations, you become subject to whatever the market is, and you don't have control over what the market is. So Houston's market for James Harden, for example, was pretty much confined to Philadelphia and the Ben Simmons package and Brooklyn and the package that they ended up taking, right? Like it wasn't it's going to come down to what teams are in circumstances where adding James Harden, or in this case, adding Kevin Durant makes sense, Like you can immediately cancel out like the rebuilding teams like the Rockets, the Thunder. They're not going to go get Kevin Durant to add to a young core that's not ready for Kevin Durant, right? So you can remove those teams and so on and so forth, right? So how many teams out there have a circumstance or scenario that would make sense to trade for Kevin Durant? Like with the Rockets, it was only two, Brooklyn and Philly. And then of those teams that it would make sense for, who actually has a realistic package with enough assets to really, really pull the trigger and to entice Brooklyn to pull the trigger as well. And so once you do that, things get slim. It's like when you go on Yelp or if you go on Airbnb and put all your filters. It's like Airbnb, not Yelp. Sorry. Although Yelp is a wonderful app. It's like if you go on Airbnb and you put in all your filters and then it goes from 300 listings to like 7, you pick the calendar day and it's like, oh shit, nothing is available. So kind of like that, right? So basically once you get down to the end of it, what teams does it make sense for that have a good enough package to where they could actually pull the trigger on it? And as it stands right now, in terms of getting like a star, I mean, the only names that have really made somewhat sense have been DeAndre Ayton and Jaylen Brown. And Jaylen Brown doesn't really make that much sense to me anyways. I mean, I'd be really hesitant if I'm Boston because you just went to the finals without Kevin Durant. So I'm not sure if you make that drastic of a switch, But that's a different discussion. So, maybe Denver, if they want to get in on it and they can part with, I don't know, Murray and Aaron Gordon, if that would get it done. I don't know. I have no idea. But so I guess what I'm saying is it's just kind of difficult to gauge because what's the market? Is there really anything outside of Phoenix that makes a lot of sense? There might be one of those emerging late game suitors that we hear about in the 10th hour, the 12th hour, whatever. But as of right now, I mean, coming out the gate, it's unclear. Maybe Portland, but who does Portland have to offer that's worth it to Brooklyn? Nurkic, which, by the way, certain deals are going to be pending the chips falling with KD, like Nurkic. He did not resign, I don't think. As of when we're recording this podcast, to my knowledge, he did not re-sign with the Blazers. So that's something to watch there. But yeah, so, Portland, what does Portland have to offer to make it worthwhile to Brooklyn in terms of high functioning role players or potential stars? They just signed Anthony, or they extended Anthony Simons. I don't think he's eligible to be traded. I'm not sure of that though. But anyway, so the point is, you just start surveying these teams around the league and you realize, I don't know who can actually pull this off to where it makes sense for Brooklyn. So then what, and that's where, as Rockets fans, you got to hope it is a pick-centric package, a PCP. Nice. Yes, we want Brooklyn to smoke PCP. That's what we want. So a pick-centric package.
Only here at State of the Rockets can you find this hard-hitting analysis.
Yeah, hey, if you use Twitter and you watch this show, take this one to Twitter. Take the PCP to Twitter. Let's get PCP hashtagged and bagged. But regardless, so you're going to want a pick-centric package because it's basically going to be Brooklyn taking a page out of Houston's book, ironically and hilariously 18 months later, after Houston had to do that at Brooklyn's direction. And so yeah, you want it to be a pick-centric package so that Brooklyn can tear things down and rebuild. And they can say, okay, cool, well, we can worry about these picks and we're just going to roll with the odds of the pick swaps and whatever while we can, which is what Houston did. Although Houston was, as we mentioned, lucky enough to get protections on those swaps. And so that's how they got Jalen Green, luckily enough. Otherwise, yeah.
No, you're good. You're good.
What? You're going to point. You got to say something.
I was gonna chime in at the end of your point before we change gears to another topic. That's why I raised the finger. We gotta get the chemistry down, right? We're only 9 episodes in.
I think the chemistry is very highly on point. But okay, wrap it up. Maybe I'm rambling. Go for it.
No, you are not rambling. You are all good. No, I was just gonna say I'm gonna throw in Toronto as a dark horse candidate that has the prime mix of young-ish, exciting talent, but also they hold. I'm pretty sure they're largely in control of their future draft picks. I think off the top of my head,
but they would have to throw in Van Vliet. And so, what is KD and OG Anunoby getting you? If I would imagine that it would have to be Scotty Barnes and Van Vliet, and whatever else matches the salary.
We'll see, but I don't even think they have to go that far, right? If we're talking would you I think Scotty Barnes and picks gets it done, or Scotty Barnes filler and picks gets it done, because then you're getting the kid that just won Rookie of the Year and future draft capital for a star that doesn't even want to play for your organization anymore. That is a huge dub if you are Brooklyn, and then if you're the Toronto Raptors, you swap out a rookie for KD and you swap out your future, so you immediately become top 4 seed favorites out east. That is an absurd switcheroo all of a sudden, and a huge power shift in the East, which is why they're kind of my dark horse pick, because they have that perfect mix of that one crown jewel piece of the trade in a cornerstone type talent in Scotty Barnes, and they can throw in a sizable amount of draft capital as well. Maybe not a straight up 4 pick swaps type trade, because they're adding that cornerstone piece. So maybe 2 picks and 2 pick swaps and Scotty Barnes. I think that's probably gets it done.
I mean, okay, so I agree with everything you said. I don't know if 2 swaps and 2 picks gets it done, depending on who that filler is. Next to Scotty Barnes.
And it depends on the other trades on the market, right? If there is another suitor out there that's offering 4 and 4, then
it depends on the market, exactly, right? I mean, I think Harden set the precedent, and Houston didn't get a player back, but I don't think that's going to affect the picks to the point where Brooklyn takes back half of the
Whoa, whoa,
draft
whoa, whoa!
capital.
This is Victor Oladipo erasure, and I will not stand for it. Okay.
Karis LeVert, the GOAT. But no, I don't think Brooklyn would accept half of the draft capital they shipped off to get Harden. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but you're totally right. Toronto snuck into the lottery last season, right? Last draft. Like they didn't seem like a traditional lottery team. They had injuries, like just a weird season for them, but they still have 2 All-Stars, Siakam and Van Vliet. OG Anunoby's a really good player. They just re-signed Chris Boucher. Like they have really talented players to the extent that if they only got rid of Scotty Barnes and filler, they could plug in. So basically they're fortunate enough to have a talent like Scotty Barnes in the first place because they lucked into the top 4. And despite being a high-functioning, good team, as we saw, what they were the 5th seed or whatever, they were able to get that lotto-type talent, and he was the Rookie of the Year. He hit for his rookie season. So they're unique in that regard, and they have all of their draft picks, right? Or I think they do. So they have that unique blend of like what it would take to get it done. So you're definitely right. And then for Toronto, it makes sense because they can afford to lose Scotty Barnes and just pair KD with Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet and OG Anunoby, and like that's an immediate contender. So that's a good one. I think that makes a lot of sense. It would just come down to the picks, I think. So and it would come down to, does Brooklyn view Scotty Barnes as a quote win now player, or do they view him as like a multi-year project? Do they even view him as somewhat duplicative of Ben Simmons? Because like
that's a good point.
Because like I would like that trade to me sounds great because I don't think Scotty Barnes and Ben Simmons is going to do much for you. I mean, no disrespect, but like the East, I mean, right now, Miami, Milwaukee, Chicago, Philadelphia, Boston. Who's that 6th team?
Chicago?
I said Chicago. Miami, Milwaukee, Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia. Toronto was the 6th team.
Toronto's the 6th team.
So Toronto.
Oh, and the Hawks. They just picked up DeJounte Murray. Like,
right. Hold on, I'm getting there. So I'm saying those are the top 6 in the East this past season. And in this scenario, Toronto remains for sure in that top 6. Philadelphia remains because they just made some moves. Milwaukee's back, Miami's back, Boston's back, Chicago. Like those teams aren't going anywhere. At least not next season, or probably not the season after that. Then Atlanta was in the mix. Now they added DeJounte Murray, so they're throw them in there. Cleveland had injuries. Otherwise, they finished with a better record. So there's Cleveland. The Knicks could sneak around and be like a slightly above 500 team that makes things difficult. The Hornets will still be around. I mean, that's 10 teams. And you're telling me Scotty Barnes and Ben Simmons is better than any of those? I don't think so. So
and the Pistons have a bright future. They're not going to be good like right away, but like 2 or 3 years, like they could be.
They're going to need to space that lineup out. They have a fun core, and I'm excited for them. I mean, they're on my League Pass squad because of I want to see Ivy, Cade, if they get Jalen Duran some playing time, I'd like to see it. But anyway, so if Brooklyn takes a package like that, that's what you're facing. That's what you're dealing with. It's like, now we can be in a position where, hey, maybe that is one of the worst teams in the NBA. And then maybe Ben Simmons gets hurt and he's not durable. He's had some back issues lately. And all of a sudden it's like Scotty Barnes and just role players. Now you're looking at, oh shit, maybe that swap right comes into play this season. And if not, maybe that first round pick you get from them the following season, 2024, maybe that comes into play. So ton of interesting issues. We're really just going to have to monitor it. I don't know how long it's going to take to progress. I feel like it's going to take a minute because I think it's going to be a tough needle to thread, that trade, unless, something happens like Toronto comes forward with that offer and Brooklyn's like, yes, Scotty Barnes, we value him high, 4 picks, 4 swaps, whatever it is. Yes, done. Get this fool out of here. I don't know. Any last thoughts on the topic?
No, I think we should talk a little bit about what's going on in Philadelphia.
Shifting gears to the Philadelphia Rockets. My boy Daryl Morey really just couldn't help himself, man. Really couldn't help himself. I mean, went out and got PJ, traded for DeAnthony Melton. That's my favorite one. He's like, that's like when you get to college, or even if you graduate college and you see that girl that you used to like, but like you just never, y'all like had that moment, but you didn't pounce on it and things just kind of went left, and it was in the back of your mind. You're like, damn, girl, Carol, what's up, Carol? You Facebook message Carol and you're like, girl, God, My bad. I apologize. So that's the DeAnthony Melton trade. He's like DeAnthony, we shouldn't have done that. You could have contributed to that 2019 team.
I just want to say your analogies tonight are incredible. So far, you've had like 2 or 3 like straight bangers, and it's been great.
Thank you. Yelp and Airbnb and that one. But so he goes out and gets DeAnthony Melton, who's going to, I think, definitely be helpful for that team. And then they signed Daniel House, which honestly, freaking hilarious and kind of frustrating. He had zero value on the market when Houston tried to trade him. And then he goes out and gets an $8 million, or I think it's $4 million a year, $8 million in 2 years. So that's frustrating, but it's funny, man. And then all the rumors about Philadelphia still being interested in Eric Gordon, which I'm going to go out and say, I don't think Eric Gordon's going to be traded. And if he is traded, I think it's going to be closer to the trade deadline. It's either going to happen right before the season or right before the trade deadline. And maybe that sounds like a Captain Obvious thing to say, but I feel like the Rockets really value his veteran leadership. And kind of switching to the discussion we had earlier, Tate will be a veteran, a veteran by function, not by actual years. Boban, if he's maintained, if he's retained, he'll be a veteran presence. If you count Nwaba as one, he's bounced around, been a journeyman, and he might have that perspective and voice in the locker room. And then Eric Gordon's like their trophy vet, the quintessential veteran. So I don't know. Like, I feel like they're going to have to be blown away by a trade offer to take him because, like, for example, I don't think they would dump him for like the 26th pick in the draft like they did with Christian Wood. I think if that was the best offer they could get, they'd say, no thanks, we'll keep Eric Gordon. But maybe that's just
any offer you get for Eric Gordon, it's not only going to have to be like a decent quality offer by way of the actual like asset return, right? The draft capital probably needs to be
at the right year.
The right year of draft capital, absolutely, right? So maybe not just again, their whole shtick this past NBA trade deadline was they wanted a future draft pick, right? They didn't want one in the 2022 draft. They wanted one further down the line, and nobody, reportedly nobody came forward with one, so they never traded him. Not only that, they also need to not take back long-term money for EG, right? That's the big one because the Rockets are currently set with the NBA salary cap projections for next season and for next offseason. The Rockets are set to have north of $70 million to play around with next summer. And that's with everybody they currently have on their roster. That's with their current, projected cap holds next offseason for KPJ and players like that. And if you take back money for Eric Gordon that will then be on the books, that directly impedes that $70 million that you could potentially have to play around with. That's 2 max slot salaries that you could throw at 2 big name free agents that summer. So whatever they decide to do with Eric Gordon, it may just wind up being in their best interest to let him play out his final year in Houston and then let him walk if they don't have the option to deal him and not take back long-term money, or also, and deal him for an asset that actually makes sense, which I will say maybe it doesn't necessarily have to be a draft pick. I do think that's the direction that makes the most sense. But maybe there's a team out there that has like a young prospect that would be enticing enough to Houston where they're like, you know what? We'll take a flyer on this guy, right? Somebody that you can like bring in and maybe like you float him down to the G League, or like a stash kind of guy that you just let him work on his game a little bit. And I think, but the biggest issue for me is EG is going to take up rotation minutes, right? If he's here, he's going to take rotation minutes. And I do think that the way the Rockets are kind of built out right now with all their guards, with the guys that you conceivably want to get minutes at the wing between like Jae'Sean Tate, KJ Martin, if he sticks around, Tari Eason, Jabari, like where do you find minutes for this guy? Because Eric absorbed most of his minutes at the 3 spot this last season, right? He started at the 3 spot. He was basically the Rockets small forward for a majority of the year. What do you do this next go around? Like, do you bench Jae'Sean Tate to start the year after you just signed him to a long-term deal? Do you move him to the bench? He's been Steven Silas's guy for almost 2 straight years now. You're going to start Jabari, so maybe they bring Eric Gordon off the bench this time around. But even if you do, I mean, you can't realistically get him 30 minutes a night without cutting into a majority of the minutes for all the other guys. So that's where I come away thinking I'm inclined to believe that they're going to do their best to probably move him before the season starts, just because I think that otherwise you're going to run into a situation where unless EG is happy just playing like 12 minutes a night and babysitting the younglings, I don't see it working out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. To your point about taking salary back, they could maybe do something similar to what they did with Dallas, right? And just take back scraps that add up and make the salary match that whatever team is trading wasn't in their rotation, and whereas Eric Gordon will be in their rotation, and Houston can just let them expire and move on with it as long as they get the pick that they're looking for. That could happen. So we'll see. And I agree with you about the rotation minutes. I mean, I just want to, let it go and just see the young guys. But I mean, we have a young backcourt. Eric Gordon is the only vet. I mean, I'm saying that I think they really value his veteran presence and leadership just as much, if not more than, the 22nd pick in the draft, for example, unless it's going to be like maybe the 14th pick or something that they really, really think outweighs the value that he brings. But yeah, last thoughts on the Philadelphia Rockets. I mean, you got James Harden, PJ Tucker, DeAnthony Melton, originally drafted by the Rockets, Daniel House, hilarious, Daryl Morey, and Tad Brown.
And former G League MVP, Trevelin Queen. Don't forget that
Queen.
one.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I don't really watch the Vipers, and Trevelin Queen was never in my, I remember when I was on the Real GM boards. I was a moderator on Real GM, by the way. Shout out to that for anyone that remembers that. I was a moderator on Real GM, and we were Vasilis Spanoulis. If anyone remembers V-Span, right? We were like, oh man, we gotta play we gotta play him, like all hyped up, like, yo, he's the next big thing, man. You gotta give him time. And it never worked out, right? Needless to say, that's just an example of why I don't get in the weeds and attached to like the guys like a Trevelin Queen, where you're like, man, you just gotta let this guy play, give him a chance, because you realize it's just unrealistic. And in a franchise like the 76ers, I'd be surprised if he gets a real chance, because they're going to try to win a championship the next year, 2 years, 3 years. And unless they just like unleash him and trust him and he kills it, and this perfect scenario plays out, I feel like he'll just be tucked away for a few years. So it doesn't really register much on my radar. Maybe I'm totally wrong about that though. But
I want to throw in a quick anecdote on V-Span. He, for whatever reason, I don't know why, I was just like infatuated with V-Span back in the day. I would play NBA 2K and I would pick V-Span and I would like airdrop him on a team like the Pacers for whatever reason, and I'd crank up his stats to like the mid 80s, like on like his overall, and he'd be like my best player on the team, and I would just like run point with V-Span, 6'4" Greek guard, like just doing everything on the floor. Basically, I treated him as like Greek Russell Westbrook, which I guess is what you would get if you shrunk Giannis down to 6'4". So that's basically what I did with V-Span in 2K, and it was like the funniest thing. I won like multiple championships with like random teams. Like I'd put him on like the Pacers or like the Bobcats or whatever, and just truck through an entire season with him as my best player. It's hilarious.
Yeah, man. I mean, I used to just be on message boards like, they got to play V-Span. Why aren't they playing V-Span? And I think he only ended up playing like 30 games as a Rocket or whatever. But anyway, so Tad Brown, Daryl Morey, PJ Tucker, James Harden, DeAnthony Melton, Daniel House. I mean, Trevelin Queen.
They're going to win one for the 2018-2019 Rockets.
Give me a break, dude. All they got to go do is get Trevor Ariza and Ryan Anderson at this point. Maybe I'm surprised that they haven't signed Gerald Green. He tried to make his comeback with the Vipers last season.
They need to go get Iman Shumpert. There you go. That's the missing ingredient piece of the 2018-2019 Rockets.
Son of a gun. And okay, so we can spend this last phase then talking about Summer League, which is next week in Vegas.
It is already here. It's absurd how fast NBA offseason moves. We blinked. Yeah, we will be there. It's going to be awesome.
We will be there. Yeah, we blinked, and then boom, boom, here we are. KD requested a trade. It's crazy, man. It sucks, too, because it's like, man, when I try to take time off and go do other things, it just draws you right back in. That's when the craziest shit happens, and you're just like, okay, now I got to stay glued to this, And then when you stay glued to it, it's like stupid notifications like, Andre Drummond signs with the Bulls. DeAndre Jordan to the Nuggets. By the way, DeAndre Jordan to the Nuggets.
Oh wow, that immediately just like trigger warning, Roosh. he woke him up. Man's over there kind of fading a little bit. If you're watching on YouTube, he's kind of like leaned over towards the mic. He's been kind of mellow for a minute, and then just out of nowhere, DeAndre Jordan to the Nuggets.
Just to think that the Nuggets were parked up in free agency, like, yo, we got our guy. Just fist pumping. We got our guy, and it's DeAndre Jordan. What?
You know what it is? It's a precursor to them getting KD. That's what the whole thing is, right? Because wherever DeAndre Jordan goes, that's KD's guy. So KD's suddenly gonna be a Denver Nugget overnight. Just you wait.
Let me also I get fired up about this. Let me just say, player empowerment era. It has irked the shit out of me, because I want to see these guys get paid. I want to see these guys control their destiny, and I don't want to see these guys get jerked and yanked around. But at the same time, I don't want to see this game get so lopsided and twisted that dudes on a max contract for 4 years that they just signed are able to say, you know what? Peace. Never mind. I don't want to see what, James Harden did to the Rockets happen, what Anthony Davis did to the Pelicans happen, what Kawhi did to the Spurs happen. What Paul George did to the Thunder, although the Thunder just bent over and took it. But, sorry. But I don't want that to continue happening. So I will say, look at the Brooklyn Nets. They relinquished straight up power to KD and Kyrie. They said, hey, who do you want as your coach? Steve Nash? Zero pedigree, zero credentials? Bet. Done. Oh, you guys are going to co-coach and be a cohesive unit? Oh, great. Yeah, right. Didn't work out that way, did it? At least not yet. You want to go have access and resources to our yachts and all this and throw your parties and do it? Man, go do it. You want to have private workouts and have James Harden in here so we can secretly say, hey, let's do that. What else, man? You guys want creative control over whatever the hell, blah, 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 right? They wanted all this inclusion. And what ended up happening? They straight up bailed, they straight up bailed. So I hope we're at a point where, man, the next CBA is going to be crazy because this can't keep happening. I'm glad it's happening because it's benefiting the Rockets, but that's the only reason I'm glad it's happening, because it's benefiting the Rockets. Otherwise it's bullshit. It's dog, you chose this destination. They paid you for a year while you sat on your ass and rehabbed. Obviously, I'm not blaming you for being injured, but they paid you to be in recovery, as many teams would have, because you're Kevin Durant, but they're the ones that did it. And then you came back and you gave it your all and you held up your end of the bargain. And now you're not. They wanted DeAndre Jordan. 4 years, $40 million. DeAndre, boom. Jared Allen, peace. That wasn't a smart move. They wanted to mortgage the future for Harden. That was definitely not a smart move. Hallelujah. Amen. Right? They could have just built that team out. Karis LeVert, Dinwiddie, Jared Allen, either use them or flip them for other pieces. Sign Patty Mills. You had Joe Harris.
Hindsight's always 20/20, and we can go down a gigantic rabbit hole here. I think we should revisit this topic, and we need to remember to do this, because I do think we should talk about just the player empowerment stuff at another point in time.
I'll wrap it up. I'll just say, use them as a case study for how wrong things can go, and let's steer this thing back to some balanced form that works for both sides reasonably. Because that's when the NBA is at its best. I mean, I know we love the drama, but at the same time, this is a clown show. So, anyways,
reality TV for me.
It is reality TV for the bros. It's kind of crazy. When I realized that a few years ago, and I was like, oh,
that's why we're so hooked. And then from that point on, you're like, all right, I'm never gonna make fun of anybody watching reality TV again, right, because 100%. That's what this is.
So, Summer League. We don't know the rosters yet, do we?
No, they haven't been officially announced. I don't know when they officially announced them. I'm assuming we'll find out sometime early Monday, Tuesday of this upcoming week. We might even find out over this weekend. So we should be on the lookout for that. Although from the Rockets' perspective, I think we can safely assume we know that Josh Christopher and Usman Garuba will be playing. The 3 Rockets rookies will definitely be playing. And that's more or less going to be your starting lineup. I don't think we're getting Alperen Şengün.
No, we're not getting Alperen Şengün. I'm pretty confident in saying that we're not getting Alperen Şengün. There was someone else.
Jae'Sean Tate.
Knicks. Yeah, I think Knicks will start over Ty if I have to guess.
I think so too. I think Knicks is going to start over. I think you're looking at a starting lineup of Jae'Sean Tate, Josh Christopher, Jabari Smith, Tari Eason, Usman Garuba, which is one hell of a starting lineup in Vegas Summer League. That team is going to put in some work. And also, random sidebar here, but apparently Cade is playing in Summer League for the Pistons for some reason.
He's on their roster. I would be very surprised if he played. I'd be very surprised.
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
Sense. That would be a mistake to me. There's no reason for me to play, in my opinion. But we'll be there, which will be fun. But yeah, look, in years past, you've had those guys like Kyrie Thomas or Anthony Lamb, where it's okay, less Kyrie Thomas, but guys like Anthony Lamb, where you're like, that guy's playing in the G League. He's not playing with the Rockets. If he does play with the Rockets, it'll be a mid-season random call-up, few games here and there, but he's not a Houston Rocket, right? He's not in their plans. But this starting 5 is going to be all guys that will probably actually contribute to the Rockets at some point this season. Garuba, I'm sure will play. Josh Chris, I'm sure will play. Tari Eason, I'm sure will eventually find minutes. Jabari Smith will definitely play. And Ty Washington, maybe not Daishen Nix. Daishen Nix might play, and Ty Washington might play. So I'm excited about that. I mean, like legit NBA players. Daishen Nix, I think the jury's still out. But I think the other 5 are NBA players. Maybe you could disagree about Garuba. That's why I stopped up there. But I'm confident in Garuba. So
I think the way to look at it, right, is it's 6 legitimate prospects and or like current NBA players all playing, which is what makes it exciting, right? Because sometimes you do look at summer league and you look at the names and you're like, I don't even recognize half these names, and or like you look up and down the roster and you're like, I recognize one name on this entire list of like 12 dudes, and because all of them are like guys who are vying for like a spot in the G League or who went undrafted.
They're trying to get like an invite to
like
training camp or something. Like they're just trying to stick. So
and respect to those guys, right? For grinding it out, for going to summer league, for putting in that work, absolutely. But from just an excitement perspective, like as outsiders looking in, it's cool to recognize those names and be hyped about a summer league roster, which is I guess where we're at as an organization at this point, which is honestly not half bad. Summer league was awesome last year, so like I'm looking forward to doing it again. Summer league's
great because like I'm not, and no disrespect to Anthony Lamb, but like I'm not watching Anthony Lamb and getting excited thinking about like, oh, this guy's gonna be on the Rockets, because you can clearly tell he's probably not an NBA player. But yeah, 6 prospects, all of whom could at some point be important to what the Rockets are doing. That's exciting, so I'm excited to see it. I don't have predictions. The Rockets tend to do well in summer league. I will say one thing I was thinking about: Will Weaver, who is no longer with the Rockets, coached the summer league team last season, and we don't know who the assistants are yet. So who's going to coach the summer league team?
My best bet is it's going to be Rick Higgins. I think summer league is maybe a little bit below John Lucas's pay grade, and Rick Higgins is the only other assistant that is currently still on Steven Silas's staff. So I would assume we're going to see Rick Higgins coach summer league for the Rockets, unless they go way out of left field and have John Lucas just fly out to Vegas and coach up the young guys for a week and a half, which I just really don't see happening. Silas isn't going to coach summer league, so that's process of elimination. I think that's the direction they're going to go, which will be cool because Rick Higgins, to my knowledge, has been a big part of the development process for this Rockets team, but he's also, of the assistants they've had on the staff this past year, he's the guy that I know the least about, like just in general. Like his pedigree, like what he's good at, all that kind of stuff. So this will kind of be like, at least for me and for a lot of Rockets fans, kind of a glimpse into how he can run things, right? Summer League this last year kind of showed what Will Weaver could do, right? Some of the actions they were running, some of the things they were doing offensively, defensively, that kind of thing. You got a glimpse into Will Weaver's mind as a coach, and that can hopefully be the same thing we get out of Rick Higgins this time around.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I heard about Rick Higgins when we got him because I have a buddy that works with the Magic. And so I think that's where Rick Higgins came to Houston from.
Yeah.
So heard good things about Rick Higgins. So that's interesting. I didn't think about that. So yeah,
we are going to do a prediction though, before we wrap up. I want us to both predict Jabari's opening night stat line, because he's playing, right? Opening night in summer league is against the Orlando Magic against Paolo Banchero.
Yeah. I'm going to say Jabari goes off for 18-7.
Okay. I'm going to say 20-8. And I'm going to say 5 triples. I'm guaranteeing 5 triples from Jabari Smith.
I'm going to say 18-7 and 4 triples opening night.
All right. I like it.
So pucker up and suck on that. Any last words before we dip?
I don't think I have anything. I'm just excited, man. This Rockets team has given me life. Like I know it's not the best to not be, at the top fighting for championships and stuff, but it's a different kind of fun. It's a different kind of excitement, right? Like, I mean, you spend years at the top of the NBA life cycle, and sometimes you're grinding through the regular season. You're like, man, can we just, you still appreciate the games and the cool moments, but you're just like, man, let's just hit fast forward and get to the playoffs, right? Where the games matter. Like sometimes that's just kind of how it feels and how it felt, a little bit towards the end of the James Harden era. Now it's like just every game, it's like, yo, what is Jalen Green going to do tonight? What are we going to see out of Jabari Smith? And that's kind of a cool place to be as an organization, as a fan, as somebody who just loves the game of basketball. I love being able to be excited on a game-by-game, day-by-day basis just to see this team grow and see what it can become. So,
yeah, I mean, look, you could be some people have tweeted this at me, and I think it's important. I mean, the Rockets have really seemed to understand from the top down, ownership, management on down, the idea of a rebuild, you know? I mean, we could be the Knicks where you're paying big money to Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson, and who knows where that's going to take them, you know? And I don't remember the last time they had a top 2 pick. We just had a number 2 and a number 3 back to back, you know? And it's hard. It's hard for like the decision makers to sit by and just watch that happen, especially when they came aboard and James Harden was, you know, we were championship contenders. So it's a hard thing to do, but I think it's the right thing to do, as you're seeing by missteps in Brooklyn, for example. So I'm excited, man. I mean, they've given us vision and direction, and we can fill in the blanks with our imagination and our hopes, and we can argue about it, and we always do on Twitter, and we debate and blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, pretty bright young core, man. If KPJ hits, if Jalen Green hits, you know, if that last 8 games or whatever of the season was like a projection into the future, and then you add Jabari Smith to that, and then you add Tari Eason to that, and then you get a starter's version of Alperen Şengün added onto that, and like, who knows, man? Still got draft capital, still have a ton of cap space. You can either absorb, you know, a max contract via trade into it, or you can sign someone, or just a ton of options, man. So it's exciting. And we have a badass fan base that has stuck with this team through being the worst team in the league 2 years in a row, which I think is pretty unique, right? I mean, for how bad we suck, the Rockets fan base is still like just active daily.
ride or dies, daily. Man.
It's awesome, dude. So yeah, I'm excited, man. I'm tired of telling about to pass out, but I'm excited. We'll see you guys next week. Presumably after Summer League, after the first game of Summer League, which, man, Banchero versus Jabari Smith, we'll see what happens. The Philadelphia Rockets are in the process of reassembling. Kevin Durant said peace to Brooklyn, and Jae'Sean Tate will be a Rocket for 3 more years pending the structure of that contract. So that's the wrap on what we got today. Jackson, anything else? Oh, I'll say, do us a favor. If you're still watching, probably should have done this earlier, but if you're still watching, go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review, man. If you like us, leave us a 5-star and type out and say, damn, these guys are tight. I love listening to these guys because the Rockets are great, or whatever it is that you truly think. So I'll say that. And I'll also say, drop a comment, talk to us, holler at a player. Jackson?
No, you covered all the bases. I'll just, the plugs, listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, all the platforms. Check us out on YouTube. All the subscribers, all the love, all the interactions. It's great. Roosh and I really love doing this, right? We love talking Rockets basketball. We love interacting in the YouTube comments. We love interacting on Twitter. Add us, DM us, hit us with questions. We both do our absolute best. Roosh is better than I am. I'm trying to up my game a little bit. I'm a little bit washed on the Twitter streets compared to how I used to be a couple years ago. But, we try our best to respond to everybody, hit you back if you got questions, comments, concerns, all that stuff. But yeah, that's going to do it for us. So be on the lookout for our very next episode. Live, well, not live, but, in person, arm in arm from Vegas Summer League next week. It's going to be dope. We're going to have little handheld microphones and everything from some hotel room somewhere in Las Vegas. It's going to be awesome. So be on the lookout for that. Until then, go Rockets.
It's the remix to Ignition.